Your Steve Jones Show podcast is loading now. The Steve Jones Show podcast is sponsored by Sunbury Motors, North 4th Street in Sunbury, and Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf.
Neal Coolong joins us. Sir, it is an active time.
It is. I love this time of the year. Level of humidity in the air has a certain feel to it that kind of tells you it's the early beginning of football season. Things happen. There's real things to talk about, almost really real things. This is still kind of padsless for the most part, what we know up to this point.
Yeah.
Padsless practice, and for the Steelers, no significant injuries as of yet. So it's been fun to kind of sit back and see how the pieces that they've lined up are working together early in camp, and I think there have been some positives, and it's kind of exciting to see what maybe this team could do. Maybe they could sneak up on a few people.
All right, so before we get to the Steelers, let's get to Deshaun Watson. 6 games. The commissioner has to make a decision what to do. What do you think he does? I really think Judge Robinson served them up with the exact language that they would need if this was to go to trial. In other words, if they were to appeal to themselves, impose the punishment that they wanted, and the union sued the league over it, which is by everything that we've heard what would happen if the NFL did appeal, I think she gave them a fairly clear path to do that and be successful with it. The union said that they weren't going to appeal, and I think this is probably a better case scenario for their client than anything else that it could have been. But overall, the way that I would see it, does the league want to appease Judge Robinson in the position that she is in, the position that they were 50% owners in having created, or along with appeasing the union to say we're in this together. This is the process that we agreed upon. We understand that we gave you the right to do this, but that doesn't mean that we're going to be real happy about it either. Or do they want to appease the fans who, whether or not they really understand how this whole process works, are, needless to say, not real happy with what they've seen up to this point. Honestly, I could see him doing either thing. I really could. For me, I really think for everything else that's going on within the NFL, and now all the Dolphins stuff that just came out that they're going to have to talk about all season, I don't think they want any more than what they already have. And they already have a PR nightmare as far as Deshaun Watson, and that will follow him for the rest of his days. I don't think they are really doing any – they're not doing themselves a whole lot of good by going through the process of appealing the decision and kind of creating a fire on that end, and then going to court over the whole thing, which is going to make this thing drag on even more. This is, I've said this before, Steve, this is a rare instance in which the NFL really didn't have anything to do with the problems that they're in. Right.
And I'm not sure how far they want this to go anymore, because they have problems that they did cause that they have to worry about. The Daniel Snyder issue is not going away anytime soon. The John Gruden issue is not going away anytime soon.
Right.
Now they're faced in the crosshairs of having suspended for a year a player for gambling on the game, yet not really doing a whole lot to the owner, who, in my opinion anyway, did more to disrespect the integrity of the game than Calvin Ridley did. So to me, you've got to fight that fire next. That was something they always knew was going to come up. I guess if I had to bet, I'd say that they wouldn't, just because the path of least resistance might be the easiest thing for them to do right now. I'm not saying that makes it right, but at the same time, the NFL is not a legal entity. They're not here to try this criminally. They followed the process that they have set up with the union. They wanted the longer sentence. They didn't get it for a variety of reasons we don't need to get into. They didn't get it, but they tried. That really is probably the image I think that they want to maintain, is that this is a rare instance in which the NFL really didn't have anything to do with the problems that they're in. And I don't think they want any more than what they already have. And they already have a PR nightmare as far as Deshaun Watson, and that will follow him for the rest of his days.
for the best outcome in a losing situation for everybody.
The University of Michigan Business School is named for Stephen Ross. I don't think they're going to use this as an example as to how to conduct business. When you read all this, it kind of ties in a little bit with the Belichick tweet to the quote, "the wrong Brian." Something tells me he knew what was going on.
The whole thing is just like, I can't fathom a world in which there are people in levels of remarkable influence and power that are so utterly clueless about the things that they do day to day. You hear the rumors, you met with Tom Brady or whatever. You kind of think that, like, they met on a golf course at some point. Maybe it came up, but that's not really binding or anything. No, in fact, he sat down, had a business meeting with him, and offered him ownership of the team. Like, in what world do you think that's a good idea? I mean, he didn't need to do that. It's way ahead of when you're supposed to do that. And the ramifications of getting caught, whether how serious this meeting was, the ramifications of that are significant. And still, I'll still contend that they got slapped on the wrist for the most part. Really, it's the brazenness of it, I think, is probably more why if you look at it just tampering, and tampering legally is defined as simply as what I suggested in the hypothetical golfing situation.
Right. They
got together on a golf course, and they were talking about it during a tournament that they were both in, irrelevant of each other.
Like, say a quarterback for the Detroit Lions is vacationing in the same hotel as the head coach of the Rams in Mexico. And they
reasonable.
And they happen to meet. Gee. Which is what happened. It's reasonable
that it would come up, that they would chat, and you kind of expect a certain level of professionalism, as in they're not bringing in the lawyers and the agents to hammer out a contract while they're there that's all top secret. But that's kind of what Ross did. I mean, it's completely bizarre to me that you have to give weight and credence to everything. And my only thought now, as far as Ross goes, it's more like, he's owner super fan, and he's just kind of trying to fit in with the guys. Like, hey guys, how we can get better? Let's just lose games, okay? If we lose games, we get a good draft pick. Let's go do it. That's funny. Right. Hey, by the way, I got a secret quarterback coming to you guys. All right, I'm gonna reel him in for you. Yeah. Just being kind of a muttonhead about the whole thing. I can't. Maybe that's just me. I can't envision a scenario that he really thought none of this was going to be a problem. And on top of it, he won some games, which was always kind of my thing. I don't think that Miami played as if they were trying to lose. I don't think, and Brian Flores has said as much, he didn't try that. It just looked like it early in the season. Yeah. He struggled quite a bit, as you might recall. That team was pretty bad, but he got them going. By the end, they were playing some pretty decent football. You respect that, and you think then, they were tanking and blah blah blah. It's like, yeah, that's what everybody says. When there's a hot name in college that people want, it becomes alliteration time. Who can come up with the best, phrase to signify that you really want to draft this player 1 overall? That tank for Tua was the big thing. Now that obviously didn't work out very well as far as anybody is concerned, considering who went behind Tua. But the whole idea that it would be that much of an emphasis to a point that he literally offered $100,000 for every loss. It boggles my mind of why you would do that anyway, even if it was a joke, which that's more or less what Ross said. I could see it being a joke more than a realistic offer of any kind. But if you're Brian Flores, you probably don't appreciate that a whole lot either. So I don't blame how it turned out. And ultimately you blame Ross for the whole thing because, well, he's the idiot that said it. That's just not something that you say. It's not a joke. It's not funny. And it does call into question the integrity of the league. And right now, at a time where close to billions of dollars are changing hands on a season-to-season basis, with gambling, these are things that you just simply can't do. And for him to have done this many things, it's just ridiculous. It's funny to me sometimes. I can't believe how they run the operation that they do. I don't think as many highly qualified people as I know of in the NFL represent the majority of people working inside the NFL. And oftentimes it's kind of the owner that might be sort of responsible for a lot of this because he is one of them as well.
All right, so the quarterback situation, it's only 1 week in. Nobody really has talked about Mason Rudolph. What are his chances?
Honestly, I don't think it should be dismissed that Mason Rudolph is not capable of winning the starting quarterback position on this team. I also think, though, that if that is a possibility, the situation is probably a lot worse than people think that it is.
Yes.
You brought in the free agent quarterback, and while, we're certainly not looking at, Johnny Unitas on the free agent market or anything, but Mitch Trubisky was the top option. I think that's reasonable to say.
Yep.
The Steelers signed him 46 seconds after free agency started. So clearly they had interest in this. And they signed him to a contract that, if it really matters at that low of a dollar amount for a starting quarterback in the NFL, $3 million salary this year. Rudolph got paid $5 last year. Keep that in mind. And Trubisky at $7.5 this year. I don't think the cost difference between the two makes a huge difference for what they're doing. But you brought Trubisky in not as a backup. You're not paying him backup salary. Rudolph is obviously closer to that. You'd think that Trubisky would have the edge. If that's the case, then you'd think, the talk would be more about Trubisky. It hasn't been. So it makes you wonder, how far off is this? How low is the ceiling of this group? If Trubisky can't, step up and fairly obviously beat out Mason Rudolph, what do you have? And I'll go back to this again. I've said this 1,000 times since March. When you have two quarterbacks, you have none. And that's really what, in my opinion, that's what we're seeing. Give credit to Rudolph. He's an experienced veteran. He's played within the offense. He knows the players. He's got a tactical advantage, perhaps over the first week before pads come on and, you're doing your thing. Give him credit for doing what he should have done. He's there to succeed. It doesn't matter whether he starts or not. You have to respect that at least. But if it's clearly obvious that if we can compare these things, apples to apples, which probably isn't true, but if we can compare them, Rudolph has been the guy who's been better. And if it's that easy to see, is the problem here that they picked the wrong quarterback in March? Is the problem here that the one you brought in not any good? Or is the problem really that neither of them are any good and just one of them is standing out more than the other? It's like you're in school, you get a 50% on a test, and your buddy got 28%. You both failed the test. One did better than the other, but is there a winner in that competition? Does it really matter? That's what I'm worried about. And there's a lot of time left to go. I don't think that there's a sense of panic to this point, but I'm not sure, as competitive as they might be with each other, I'm not sure how competitive they are versus the market of NFL quarterbacks. And we've seen over and over again, when you're 15th, 16th in the league, you're probably needing to be propped up pretty good by your offense. And that, I think, is really the pressure that the Steelers have right now. Are they able to get in a lot of new players, a lot of young players, to a point where they can perform above perhaps where they were drafted, how much they were signed for, in order to keep this offense going, because they just might not have it at the quarterback position. To me, that's the biggest question of everything.
What do you think? I know that they're going to chart, and they are charting every rep. What to you is more important, day in, day out practice, or the 3 preseason games for the quarterbacks?
I think practice. The reason I say that is practice. The way they are practicing and the things that they are doing, they're working on installing their offense. They're going over all the things that they're going to do. That is much more similar to their practices during the season than a preseason game is going to be. That's not the best comparison, but what I know is they practice a lot more than they play in games. you need to have successful practices in order to have successful games. You don't ever hear anybody, we had a terrible week of practice, that's why we went out and scored 65 points.
Right.
It's probably not going to happen. If they show in practice that they can do these things over the course of the practice, that to me would indicate a higher level of likely success when it comes to the regular season, preparing for the games. Preseason games, they're going to get their looks. We're going to see things. I mean, go back to this. I remember that this isn't exactly fair, and I'm not trying to bring up a sore subject, but I remember being really excited to watch Dwayne Haskins in their last preseason game last year against Carolina.
Right.
We've seen some, we've seen several quarterbacks wearing the Steelers uniform in preseason games that never played football again.
Right.
In my opinion, Dwayne Haskins was on that level in that game.
Mm-hmm.
That was awful.
Yeah.
I can't necessarily say we should hinge everything for what we saw of Dwayne Haskins on that game, knowing that unless something goes wrong, we weren't going to see him again in the regular season. And for what the Steelers knew of that game and practice and everything else that comes with making that decision, they not only kept Haskins on that team, but they gave him a significant raise to be on this, at least to try out for this year's team. Mm-hmm. So they obviously didn't look at it like that. And to me, that kind of suggests practice probably has a little bit more value, but live reps are absolutely important. They're not going through the motions. There are things to be won and lost for a lot of the players who are out there. And in the end, it's not just about the game itself. When you travel, you have to know how that all works. Meetings in hotels, the walkthroughs, all of those things those are internal team experience moments. You have to kind of show that you can do that and grasp what's being done, along with helping out with not planning necessarily, but you're sharing your observations when you're on the sideline not playing. All those things play into you being a functioning member of a team, certainly as a backup or a deep roster guy. You have to show that you're getting everything that you're being given, and you're going to be prepared to go out and play.
Always intriguing, always fun. Thanks so much, Neal. Look forward to next week. That was another great segment.
Definitely. Thanks for having me, guys.